right, super. All right, let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar, Enhancing Shared Mobility, Innovative and Inclusive Policies and Tools. So a lot to say. Thank you, POLIS Network and the Interreg Europe Project SMAPE for leading the organization of this webinar. My name is Sami Angstelm, and I'll be your host for the session today. I am working as a mobility consultant for a European innovation consultancy called BAX, and I also happen to be working on the Shared Mobility for All project, which is one of the projects that will be represented today. A few practical information: this webinar is being recorded. We'll have 3 presentations from 3 different projects of around 15 minutes, and we'll then open a panel discussion with the different speakers. So during those presentations, you can already ask different questions in the chat, and we'll pick them up during the panel discussion. But before we dive into all the different presentations, let's first have a very quick round of introductions from the speakers. So I'll ask all of you in 30 seconds, Maria, Bram, and Daniel, to quickly introduce who you are, for which organization you work, and which project you'll be talking about today. So I'll just share the slides, and maybe we can start with from left to right with Maria.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Maria Referiato. I'm an environmental scientist and an external scientific researcher in the Regional Development Fund of North Aegean.
Super, thank you. And you will be representing the SMAPE project today, right?
Yes,
wonderful. Thank you. Bram?
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Bram Seves. I come from Belgium. I live in Ghent, and I'm a project and policy coordinator at Autodata.net, CarShare Belgium. And I'm here representing the Shared iMobi Hub project.
Thank you very much, Bram. I've seen a lot of people from Belgium in the call already, so for sure, lots of familiar faces. And let's finish with Daniel.
Hello, everyone. I'm Daniel Herrera. I work for POLIS. We are part of SMALL, and I see a lot of also familiar names in the chat. So nice to have you all.
Thank you, everyone. Now that we've seen your faces, we will have different presentations from you, starting and first with Bram, and then Daniel, and finishing with Maria. But before we start on your presentation, I think it's important to give a bit of context on how important it is for cities to put in place the right policies for shared mobility, both for the public authority itself, but also for the shared mobility operators themselves. So I think we've all seen shared mobility booming in the last years, and we've also witnessed maybe a bit of chaos at the beginning, especially with wrongly parked vehicles, too many vehicles on the streets, vehicles going too fast, different safety concerns. I think we've just seen a lot of challenges and problems in how to manage shared mobility. And this was the results of little or no communications between operators and cities, and therefore no policies. And I think today we see more and more cities are getting back control, imposing, putting different rules and measures to organize shared mobility in cities. But too often these rules can also be too demanding for the operators, or also put at risk the profitability of these companies, making the market for shared mobility sometimes less attractive because policies can be too strict. And we see that in certain cases, like in London, for example, where there are questions about it. So the answers lies in balance, ensuring that the policies and rules that we put in place create a safe and inclusive and sustainable shared mobility system, while ensuring that the market remains profitable somehow. And for this, we need conversations. We need to share best practices among projects and cities, and that is exactly why we're here today. We'll have 3 different presentations with the speakers you just met. SMAPE, which is, I think, to my knowledge, one of the first EU projects that is really building strategies and action plans for shared mobility from different public authorities. We have the Shared iMobi Hub project, which is working on mobility hubs and creating different definitions and standards on the integration of shared mobility. And finally, we have the Shared Mobility for All project, also known as SMALL, which looks at the inclusivity aspect and how to make sure that as many people as possible can also benefit from shared mobility. And so I'll give the word first to Bram from the Shared iMobi Hub project, as you will give us a very, I think, good first introduction on the general policy framework on how to navigate the world of shared mobility. And I'll now stop sharing my screen so that you can share yours for the presentation.
Thank you. I'll start sharing. I guess you see my full screen now. Great.
Yes.
So thank you very much for the, I'm just going to make this a bit smaller. Yes, for the invitation for speaking here today. I will indeed talk a bit more in general on frameworks / regulations for shared mobility. Because, I mean, you have been saying it in the introduction, why do we want a regulation or a framework for shared mobility? I think most of us or all of us here today are in favor of shared mobility, but we have to admit that the past years there were some challenges with shared mopeds, shared e-scooters parked on the sidewalks, cluttering of micromobility in public space. 2017 there was the first wave of shared bikes from China, which caused a lot of problems in some of our cities. And also there's the issue of vandalism in some of the cities in Europe. So these are things that we think can be improved, and a framework or a regulation is of course something that really helps with that, in order to get situations where shared mobility is organized properly in public space, where users are taking care of the vehicles, etc. So that's framework. I work for, as I said, I am project and policy coordinator at Autodeel.net, CarShare Belgium, and we are actually an organization that focuses on the promotion of shared mobility in Belgium and abroad. And we have two main pillars. One pillar is on policy, so collaborating with municipalities on creating good shared mobility policies. And on the other hand, we have a community working part of our team, which focuses on convincing potential end users or current end users of the benefits of shared mobility, doing communication campaigns, giving information sessions, etc. So this is our work, but we are also involved in several EU projects like Shared iMobiUp and also SMAPE, the other project that is presented here. We are partner in, and we initiated that project 2 years ago. But let's go back to the frameworks. If we look at the possibilities to regulate shared mobility, there's quite an interesting study from Sam Swartz and Mark Bennett that give the overview of the possibilities for public governments, public authorities to regulate shared mobility or regulate in general. On the left side, you have a system open licensing system, which actually means that any eligible operator can receive a license if they meet the license terms. So there's no cap on the number of operators, no cap on the number of vehicles. It's quite open. Other systems are limited licenses with a strong oversight, multi-operator partnerships, single operator partnerships, and the last one is a municipal program, which actually means that the city develops, operates the program or the shared mobility service, in this case, with internal resources and also owns everything. So you can say that if you go from the left to the right, there's an increased involvement of the city, both in investment, ownership, control, and accountability. And what we have seen with shared mobility over the past years, that we started quite on the left, especially with the new micromobility services, but we are slowly getting more to the right. Some examples of certain of these systems, licensing systems. I think the car sharing label in several parts in Europe, like in Flanders, there's a car sharing label. Ile-de-France, Lyon also have their own car sharing label. It's a good example of what we mean with this, because it's open, so every operator that is in line with the conditions can apply for a license. There's also on city level, City of Ghent adapted a new parking license system for car sharing a couple of months ago, Also, the city of Bergen in Norway is working on a new parking license system for car sharing, which basically always says like, okay, these are the rules, but there's no cap on the number of operators of our vehicles. We see this mostly happening with car sharing nowadays. If we go a bit more to the right on the spectrum, we see that the limited license, it's something that mostly happens with micromobility nowadays. For example, the bike sharing permits in the city where I live in Ghent says, okay, we have a limit of 3 operators, 2,500 bikes, no e-scooters allowed, only bikes. There's also the micromobility regulation in Brussels that has been quite a lot in the press the past months. Also the moped regulations in Amsterdam, etc., etc. A lot of cities, regions nowadays have sort of similar limited license for micromobility services. And if we go more to the right, there's the single operator partnerships. For example, most of the public city bike sharing schemes in Europe are part of a single operator partnership where there's a sort of concession, this unique, or there's one operator taking care of the service, but it's not owned entirely by the city. So that's one of the differences with the entire right of the spectrum, where the city would really operate everything. In this case, for example, Clear Channel, GCDeco, etc., operate these public bike sharing schemes. There's also recently in Flanders, in the region of Flanders, in north of Belgium, where many transport regions did a tender for a regional bike sharing scheme, which is also part of this. So also this type of tendering or this type of licensing is mostly for micromobility in terms of shared mobility, not really for car sharing, although there are some examples. For example, Lyon, which has now a specific program for a round-trip car sharing since March this year. But in general, it's something we see that's not common for car sharing. What have we been doing in this project as well is do some reflections on, okay, there are the past few years, many things have been moving in terms of licensing. But what do we think as Autodeel.net is quite crucial, or what are the building blocks for such a framework or a licensing scheme? And we think there are 4 things. First of all, it's about definitions, because we are talking about shared mobility in this webinar. But what is shared mobility? I think many of us might have a different definition on what we mean with shared mobility. There's the conditions. What do operators have to apply for in terms of what are very important things that are specific for the service, for example. There are the quality standards, and there's, of course, in the end, also incentives, because it's not only about the stick, it's also about the carrot. And if you look at the different levels to organize that, we believe that definitions, ideally, this is organized on a national or regional level, or maybe even on EU level. Because, for example, if you talk about public transport, this is also defined on the European level. Conditions, it's something that is preferably regional or local. The quality standards, the same. And incentives, we believe that's something that is really local. It's a city or a municipality that has to give the incentives to shared mobility operators. To make this a bit more concrete, what do we mean with definitions? Definitions is the legal demarcation of concept and services. For example, what is car sharing? What is shared mobility? What is round-trip car sharing? What is back-to-one bike sharing? Back-to-many, free-floating? What are all these different concepts? What is a mobility app? What is shared vehicle? What is a customer, a user, a member, etc., etc.? These are all things that are, of course, very important to have it clear. And why we believe that, at least on a national level, this should be the same, that not every city is handling its own definitions on car sharing or bike sharing, etc. And this is, of course, also linked with the second one, the conditions. And what do we mean with conditions? These are criteria an operator must fulfill in order to get a license or to be part of a procurement process. These conditions say absolutely nothing about the quality of the service, but define the essential characteristics of shared mobility services. For example, if you talk about car sharing, it should be possible that the minimal usage period of a vehicle is 1 hour or less, which is a distinction with car rental, for example. If you talk about data sharing, this is of course quite important and an essential part of the service. One-time contract, we sign or we agree once with the contract where we become part of a car sharing service, for example, which is also a difference with other car rental or lease contracts where you, or especially car rental, where you have to, or most of the times have to sign a contract every time you use the vehicle. It should be publicly available. It should be a 24/7 service, fuel or energy prices included, etc., etc. So these are things you define that you think are quite essential to speak of a certain service. Then, of course, the third level, it's the quality of the service. These are elements in a tender or in a regulation that do not really characterize the service itself, but they can create an extra value, an extra quality for the city, and most importantly, I think, for the user. So, for example, if you talk about the emissions of the fleet, this is clearly that it's a quality or interesting thing for the city because it might, as for example, for car sharing, reduce the CO2 emissions and the goals you have as a city. The type of customer support. This is very important for the user, of course. Can you call? Is there can you call the operator 24/7, or is it only during the office hours? And after that, you have to send an email, etc., etc. So there are a lot of things you can add in terms of quality in a tendering or regulation to increase the quality of the service, impact geographical coverage, inclusion. For example, are there several vehicles in the fleet that can be used by people with a reduced mobility? Is there a sort of third party tarification for people with a lower income, etc.? And then, of course, it's about incentives as well, because we believe that shared mobility has a positive impact on cities. So it's not only about regulating, it's also about giving incentives. And from our point of view, it's very important that you give the incentives to the ones that have the most impact and serve the city goals. And this can be financial incentives, for example, giving a minimal revenue guarantee for operators to operate in less economically viable areas, but also providing public space. That's also, it's a very basic one, but it's very important, of course, to be able to run your service in the public area. Parking permits, do communication campaigns for operators, with operators. That's also very important. Good to mention there as well is that there's an interesting paper called Mobility Impact Markets by Erdem Ovacik, who a really interesting paper to give another point of view on the classic tendering concession model, where you get new insights on how to collaborate with operators, incentivize them in order that they serve the city goals. So this brings me to my last slide. I've given a lot of information, I think, on what it is and what should be part of it. But of course, every city or region is quite different. So what do you have to choose in the end? And I think there are some things you have to take into account. For example, first of all, is find a balance between stimulating and regulating. As said in the introduction by Sami, it's good to regulate, but if it's too hard for operators to operate in the city or the region, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. So it's very important to find a good balance and to also give a lot of carrots to operators, especially those who serve the city goals. So that's the second one. You take a look at the impacts, do a lot of research, and based on that, incentivize on the service or on the operator level those who have a bigger impact on vehicle ownership, on the usage of motorized vehicles, the model shift, CO2 reductions, etc. If you look at car sharing, for example, we can clearly say that car sharing at this moment works best in an open licensing system. The reason for that is because car sharing is quite complex. There are a lot of different system operational models, business models, and it also increases the uptake of car sharing if there are different systems in a city. Because for person A, this system might be ideal, but maybe that's not the case for person B. So having different systems there with a different business model might be interesting. Also for cargo bike sharing, for example, I believe it's really good to work with an open licensing system because they also really address or are a big ally for reducing car ownership. So there are some cities in Europe that only give concessions to one operator, and I think, in my opinion, that's way too early to do that. I think it's better to have an open system also for cargo bike sharing, because these are systems that are really interesting for serving the city goals. And then lastly, micromobility. Yeah, I think most of us agree that micromobility might need a stronger regulation, but of course also there look at the context, because that makes sense in a commercial interesting area in the city center. But if we go to the suburbs of the rural areas, maybe it's interesting to subsidize it or to incentivize the operators to also create a service there linked with public transport. So yes, stronger regulation, but there's a big but. Maybe it's also interesting to incentivize it and to bring it more in line with the city goals. So that was in a nutshell. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you so much, Bram. And yeah, feel free to put the questions directly in the chat as well. I'm sure we'll continue this conversation in the panel. Thank you, Bram. It was very interesting to see a bit putting the right words and concepts around this entire field that is shared mobility. And I think what you presented also makes a very good transition with our next speaker when you talked about conditions and quality standards on how do you look at the different types of users and what can you put in place as cities, but also with the operators to put either new vehicles or adapt services so that more and more people can benefit from them. And I think that's one of the main questions and insights that we'll get from Daniel from the Shared Mobility for All project. The floor is yours, Daniel.
You're muted, Daniel.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. And if you swap the views,
see...
yes, it works perfect now.
Perfect. Thank you, Sami, for introducing my presentation. So yeah, indeed, this is a slightly different approach to shared mobility. So basically, we're moving from the traditional mindset on shared mobility towards one more inclusive, although I know Bram touched upon some of our aspects when he talked about the quality of the service, but yeah, we in SMALL, that stands for Shared Mobility for All, we want to change that imaginary of shared mobility and make it a concept that or a service that could be used by a lot of group of people. So I would like to start with some remarks from this traditional mindset of shared mobility. So as you know, where shared mobility basically has arrived to stay. More than 750,000 shared vehicles in the EU. It promotes the use of active and sustainable travel options and also has positive impacts on socioeconomic and environmental goals, as you can see. What do you think, or who do you think about when you think of shared mobility? So we often think of young urban adults who make use of the service, who are mobile and has no issues in using otherwise vehicles that require skills to be used, like a moped or a scooter, a shared scooter. But again, we strive to change this imaginary, and therefore we want to think of shared mobility as a service for people with different for everyone basically. So when you think of people with reduced mobility, for instance, you think of these type of people, but we we know there's a big universe of people with reduced mobility out there. And of course, for the scope of the project, we have focused, we have tried to narrow it down to 3 different target groups. Always thinking of the big target group, which is people with reduced mobility, but in small, we are specifically focusing on children, families and children, the elderly, and the physically impaired people. And this is an overview of our project, of our partnership. But I would like to focus on our approach, which is first understanding the needs of these specific target groups through co-creation. This is basically big output of our project, co-creating with our target groups. What are their needs, and trying to understand their needs, and then co-design the services and the mobility solutions with them. That's very important in our project. And for that, we have 11 type of pilots across 8 different cities. And the goal is at the end, after testing all these pilots, to draft policy recommendations. We also have it's not mentioned here, but we have, as project progress, we are developing a document called Insight Paper. So focusing on each stage of the development of a shared mobility, an inclusive shared mobility service. And these are outputs that are coming out of the discussion with the different target groups in a creative and co-design process. So how are we classifying these 11 solutions? So we have 3 different type of pilots. We have a pilot focusing on new multimodal services. So we are looking to testing a new shared mobility vehicles, adaptive vehicles. We're also looking at digital solutions. For instance, integrating or adapting mass services and other digital informative platforms to be usable for people with reduced mobility. And also we have pilots focusing on volunteering schemes, where we are trying to strengthen and integrating the voluntary services out there into these specific pilots. So a glimpse of our pilots. So with the ones focusing on multimodal services, so we have a new shared mobility service at the Cluster Hospital in Copenhagen. This is a pilot that is focusing on helping patients going to the hospital to complete the last mile with shared mobility. So it's linked to a transfer hub close to the hospital. Then we also have a shared mobility pilot on shared fleet bicycles for kids in the school of Saint-Quentin in France. So the idea is that they complete school trips within their school day, from, for instance, the main facilities of their school to the canteens by bike. So that way they're fostering also active mobility. And we also have, sorry, I went back one, oops. And then we have also a micromobility service in Barber, which is focused on people who comes to the city and would like to move. So, for instance, families and children coming to the city for the holidays, also elderly, and they want to also implement these adaptive vehicles for them to move around easier. Digital solutions, I won't go into all of them, but yeah, we are focusing on integrating, for instance, a network of the different valuable information and assets for people with reduced mobility to navigate the city in an easier way into the mass app, into different mass apps. And also, yeah, for instance, we also have this one in Brest Metropole, the third one on your top right, the first row, the crowdsourced obstacle-free navigation. So this is also a route planning app that guides people reduce mobility through the best route without obstacles for them to navigate the city. So this is a glimpse of digital solutions. And finally, we have the volunteering schemes where we have different services, tricycle services in Belgium, looking to facilitate the mobility of elderly people. And also we have the Mobitwin service, also coordinated by our coordinator Impact in the project to pick up and drop off elderly as well with the on-demand ride sharing. So we're actively engaging with our target groups, and I would like to take some time here for you to scan this QR code, because we have established a digital forum within the Net Zero Cities platform to basically engage with our community, share the knowledge we have produced in the project and the best practices on the different pilots, also access exclusive content on inclusive shared mobility that we're constantly sharing. For instance, the insight papers we are developing on the different topics on how to implement an inclusive shared mobility pilot. And yeah, this exchange and network with other cities and organizations trying to promote inclusive shared mobility. So if I may ask you, I will stay like 20 seconds here until you scan the QR code. Or less, 15. And in the meantime, because I know my colleagues from the project are here, I'll ask my colleague Carlota to paste a link in the chat for our next slide. Because as part of this project, we're also conducting an exercise to find the best practice examples for accessible shared mobility policy across Europe. So basically, we call it the small policy database. So as part of the project, we started a research to find out, okay, what's out there with regards to regulatory frameworks that includes inclusivity, accessibility, and shared mobility in Europe. This has been a quite revealing exercise because, of course, there's not much out there. And we basically, for that reason, we try to focus on policy instruments rather than encompassing regulations, to actually be able to identify key instruments that address inclusivity in shared mobility. And if you already logged into the policy database, quite easy to navigate. So we have three type of filters by policy instruments as said. So we have different policy instruments from, well, if we ever identify a law, a full law or a full plan on inclusive mobility is there, but also we have we also have a less holistic regulation and more specific policy instruments like subsidies, incentives, even yeah, I don't see them all, but yeah, you will see them once you scroll through this filter. And then we of course have it by level of jurisdiction, so national, regional, and local, and of course by country. So you will see that most of the regulations there are mostly general accessibility regulation on accessibility in transport as such. So it's more like we are looking to, or we found a lot of frameworks dealing with general accessibility in transport that sometimes mostly refer to accessible infrastructure, raising awareness, for instance, on the importance of inclusivity and accessibility in transport, but nothing really too specific on shared mobility. So this means that this is a task that we are still working on and is open. So our request for the audience also is that get in touch with us in the platform via our emails that we will share later, to share with us any update you have on regulations or policy instruments that deal with inclusivity and accessibility in shared mobility. And this is a living tool, so we are open to receiving all this information. And yeah, you can contact me and my colleague Carlota, who is also here, and yeah, this is all. Yeah, I think.
Thank you very much, Daniel. And yes,
Yeah.
all the links are in the chat. In case you have any questions, you can also put them in the chat, and we will pick them up later. I see already Soren asking for different examples, Daniel, that you're looking for. So maybe you can answer in the chat and show one of the examples of types of policies that you're looking at in terms of inclusivity. Thank you very much, Daniel. We'll have you with us later on during the panel discussion. And this leads us to the final speaker of this first round, from Maria. So I think, Maria, you're working with the focus of your own policy instruments within your project. So I think you've heard a lot of good ideas and practices, but you're really in it, right, at the moment, to sort of define how to organize shared mobility within your region. So
we will see, because
we will
we're
see.
in the beginning and not in the in the middle of establishing such hubs. So I will share the presentation. So hello from Mytilene, from Lesbos. That's the biggest island of the region of North Aegean. Oops, sorry, but it's not functioning very well.
Maybe try to unshare and reshare it again as you worked before.
Yes, I will. Okay, so hello again from Lesbos, then Mytilene. The region of North Aegean is participating in SMAPE project. It's an Icelandic region consisted of 10 islands. The morphology is intense, and the economy between the islands is represents a strong differentiation, but they are mostly agricultural and farming products and some touristic activities. So we have a seasonal mobility demand during the summer, and our road network cannot support the traffic flows. We are roughly 200,000 people in these 10 islands. We are the second smallest region in Greece, and one of the poorest in Europe. The problem in our region is that we have a touristic demand during the summer, and the road network cannot support it, and the vessels are not really helping with the transportation of the vehicles every time. So we already presented that we have some agricultural projects and some farming projects, and for the touristic product of our region, we don't have intense tourism. We have alternative tourism, bird watching, hiking, some religious tourism, and some water springs. So we tend to have alternative tourists and not massive tourism in the beginning. The main part of the funding for our infrastructure comes from the regional operational program. It has 6 priorities. The program that will be implementing all the activities from 2024 to 2030. And its vision is to empower the local perspective of planning and implementation, maximize the possible utilization of the mechanisms and resources in the islands, and strengthen the economic and social cohesion. SMAPE project is going to introduce us to some smart mobility applications, and like car sharing or some e-bikes or e-scooters and such, and would be better to focus on priority 3, that is inside the regional operational program, that is enhancing the accessibility of the islands of the region, and specifically the specific objective 3.2, in which the program originally was going to have some projects on expansion and upgrade of port infrastructure and turn them to eco-ports, and have some projects on improvement of road infrastructure and enhance road safety, including climate change adaptation. The budget of that priority is roughly 29 million, and already has some infrastructure works that will absorb the whole of the budget. So we will be, the SMAPE project implementation would aim at priority 6, that is for sustainable urban development and territorial investments and local development, that has roughly 100 million budget. All the LDIs, the local development initiatives, are aiming at the biggest islands, Limnos, Lesbos, Chios, and Samos, and the ITIs will aim at Mytilene and Chios, that are the biggest cities of the region, and all the smaller islands. All the small islands altogether have roughly 11,000 people population. So the initial goal of SMAPE project would be to revise the regional operational program itself by shifting the poor quality of transport services and introducing them to attractive and sustainable passenger transportation solutions. And we were aiming on bringing the interregional cooperation experiences to local policymakers and inspire them from other regions that have adopted such solutions. We recognized the benefits of the SMAPE region, of the SMAPE project for the region. That would be to improve the regional operational program investments and adopt some shared mobility applications, gain knowledge on shared mobility, support the policy making, motivate the policymakers through EU collaboration, identify some inefficiencies in urban mobility, activate the region ecosystem, and find, spot, and exploit the region's peculiarities. So, till today, we don't have any policies regarding shared mobility services, although the agenda for 2030 includes some such projects, mainly in sustainable micromobility, e-bike sharing, networks of electric environmental friendly transport modules, development of mobile applications and user information systems. In this point, I should tell you that car sharing is, traditional in these islands. Everyone knows which one goes to the city and shares a car with them, but it was never formal through an application or through a mechanism from the region or the municipalities. So no car sharing for the region. We already have, through private initiatives, some bike sharing stations in Mytilene, 2 of them, and we're expecting 38 new bikes in 3 more areas. In Limnos Island, we have 4 bike stations. In Chios Island, we have some e-bike stations, and one of them is in Psara Island, a very small island that is going to function from next month. We had some initiatives in Samos Island, but they were misused. And in Ikaria Island, we have 5 e-bike stations that share 35 e-bikes. So we have some, but we are not really developed in this sector. Through the implementation of the SMAPE project, we were aiming on motivating some stakeholders to invest and support the shared mobility services, aiming at the biggest cities of the region, that is Mytilene, Chios, and Samos, and promote some collaboration between local businesses and authorities, aiming at the biggest cities of the region, and achieve some local acceptance of the mobility changes and environmental friendly travel behavior. One of our most optimistic ambitions for the region through the SMAPE project is to make a launch of a call in the framework of the regional operational program for the creation of shared mobility microhubs on the smaller islands of the region of the Aegean that have a very, compact economy. These islands are Psara, Agios Eustratios and Pinousses, and also Fourni and Thymena close to Ikaria. And the call would be for those mini municipalities to establish some microhubs for them to be shared bicycle systems and scooter systems, and be able to give some charging points for smaller vehicles, electric cars, and be able to make something very small and compact close to the ports, to be able to be exploited by tourists and people that go for a nice walk, a nice excursion to these smaller islands. These smaller islands have no buses, no taxis. They have a very small road network, and they have only one village close to the port. So if we make these micro hubs, some tourists would be able to take the bike or the scooter and explore the island and the other beaches, enlarging the carry capacity of the tourists for these islands. Also, the vessels that reach these islands usually cannot transport private vehicles. So the tourists cannot bring their own cars to these islands. We are aiming at this call because we are investigating on private activities on the biggest islands, and these small islands do not show interest. So through this SMAPE project, in our collaboration with the University of West Attica, we have already made a technical document as a basis for this call of proposals. We have some meetings with technical companies for clarifications and structuring, elements. We have some issues that we have to solve, and we are developing that technical doc, especially infrastructure issues. And our next step is to contact, we have already contacted the managing authority, but we have to contact them officially when we finish the technical doc, and to prepare the call for the proposals. Through the regional operational program, we focus on community engagement, on connecting the residents and the visitors through these services, and explore these microhubs to have some economic development and tourism in the smaller islands, and make them and prepare them and present them as an example of micro touristic economy in other small islands of even the southern Aegean region. Now, through SMAPE projects, we have some ambitions on collaborating and partnership agreements through stakeholders and community organizations. We hope to bring some technology and innovation into these smaller municipalities and all the public sector. We hope to gain some experiences in developing a framework, a regulatory framework, as the past two presentations were made, for the safety, reliability, and fair competition among these services. And we hope to find a solution about monitoring and evaluating such activities and services, and having some statistics about the economic development that they can bring into our economy. Now, the SWOT analysis for the region of North Aegean and such shared mobility trends is, of course, environmental sustainability. Not that we have carbon emission problems, but it's a global problem and a local solution. We enhance the touristic experience by having such products, some bikes and scooters, and reduce the traffic congestion, especially in the smaller islands. We have some opportunities on partnerships and collaborations between the private sector and the smaller municipalities. And of course, the technology integration for the user's experience. Our weaknesses are infrastructure requirements, safety concerns, and weather dependence. And the threats for such micro-hub infrastructure is the regulatory challenges such as zoning restrictions, licensing requirements, and also there are most of them are protected villages from the Ministry of Culture. And we have some community resistance from local residents and mostly businesses. Through the SMAPE project implementation, we have already shared some regional and organizational level, some experiences that we have gathered. We have already made 2 stakeholder meetings that we have presented the project and the activity that the municipalities can develop. We have shared some experiences and opinions regarding the regional policy issues and discussed opportunities for the area. We have shared some key regional players with some key regional players, the summary reports and the experiences and knowledge that we gained through the regional project webinars. And we have started the identification of best practices from other Greek regions and municipalities to bring some, national experiences inside the project. Now we are preparing the 3rd interregional stakeholders meeting, and all the implementation team is going to attend some external events regarding shared mobility. We are disseminating experiences and details from the project through press releases and our websites. And we stay in contact with all the project partners and organizing some internal meetings to have a very good implementation of the project and a better successful management tool. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. And it's indeed time for questions as we are going to enter the panel discussions. We have about 30 minutes ahead of us to talk together with the speakers and the participants on everything that you just mentioned. Maybe while we wait for our first questions from the audience, I will have the luxury to ask the first one. I think it was Maria and also Bram. I think you pictured quite well that there's no one recipe for shared mobility within cities, and that there are a lot of different building blocks and so on, and you don't do that alone, right? So you're not alone within your own island as a policy authority deciding on those. So I think my first question is, how do you typically co-create those policies, and how do you exchange and discuss with all the different operators? Because it is also a lot of work. There are a lot, especially there are a lot of operators out there. So it's a lot of conversations to have. And we often hear sometimes that some operators are complaining because the call for projects or the procurement tenders are maybe not aligned with what is possible. So how do you avoid that? So maybe back to Bram, you mentioned all those conditions and quality standards that you need to define and then to calibrate, right? How is this process going on? Is this something that at the moment is done in a co-creative way and in a participatory way? What are the tips and tricks to do that process? Because it's a lot of work as well for policymakers to do that.
Yeah, I think it's always a bit of finding the right balance between asking for input, but in the end, of course, if it's a framework or official law, yeah, it's the city or the government who decides in the end. I think there's quite an interesting example in Flanders on the label for car sharing, which was quite bottom-up trajectory. So although I must say that it's at this moment it's a validation between with the an organization, an umbrella organization for all 300 municipalities and us. So it's not a law by the Flemish government yet, I would say, but so this was actually something that popped up already a couple of years ago, where many municipalities were saying like, yeah, it should be good to have some certain rules, what is car sharing and what are the conditions, criteria, etc. So what happened then is there were some co-creation sessions with the Flemish car sharing operators, and the municipalities. So where we came to common text, which was agreed by almost all the parties involved. So that's something I think was really interesting to see, and it's really bottom up. But I think on the other hand, there are also examples of legislations or tenders that are being published where there have been no discussions at all with operators, and especially on the quality criteria and the technical things, it's just essential to get input from the market, because these things are quite complex sometimes, that you need input. So in my opinion, it's key to have good conversations with all the operators in your city, try to collaborate, try to have regular meetings with all of them, show clearly where you as a city or region want to go to, what these are the goals, and try to bring them all together in achieving these goals.
Thank you, Bram. I think it was also very interesting that it came to something very tangible as a common text and practices that are shared by all the different operators on the labeling and so on. So that's definitely interesting. Maria, on your side, how is it in your process? How are you approaching the conversations with the operators and also other stakeholders? Because you mentioned you have within your islands a lot of local challenges and local context. What are the conversations?
We already have the morphology challenge. We have very, steep roads. We do not use bicycles, for example. It's not easy for us to use scooters. So the population itself is not used on using bicycles and scooters. So the first part is to present them the new ideas one by one. That means that the Regional Development Fund has one-to-one meetings with the mayors, present them such examples, bring them the funding opportunities, and help them prepare their tender. That's why we focused on the smaller islands, because it would be easier. If we present the smaller islands with a solution, then the bigger islands will follow. But we have the infrastructure problem, because it's not easy for us to find the electricity and the place and the right size of the hub. It will be 2 bicycles and two scooters and one plug for a small vehicle. We have many questions and we don't know the answers, and we go back to the University of the West Attica and research for an answer and get back to them again. But it's one-to-one, discussion. It's the same with the agencies of the region of the operational program, that we went and discussed what we want to do, and they are, preparing to find a solution for us, and then, get back to them with more technical information. We will see. It's a very fast for me also.
Yeah, it is an iterative process as well, correct? But I think it's interesting what you mentioned, that there's a clear strategy on like going for the small islands and having the political support and the funding for it, because in your case, it is about creating the conditions as well to attract the service providers.
Yes, because we see the problem that the vessels cannot carry the cars from the tourists, and we have to face the problem. Usually the smaller islands have, they can overcome some such problems, because the government can see that there are problems, and they can, overcome the problems and find a solution for the smaller islands in order to keep the inhabitants there.
Okay, thank you. And going then maybe to Daniel, I think from your side, looking at the inclusivity of shared mobility, I know we've been organizing recently a roundtable with operators. How did it go? How are the conversations in terms of inclusivity going on with shared mobility operators?
Yes, I think for our approach is a bit different, because I think we need to focus a lot with on engaging the users, right, involving them in the whole process. So I think at Small, let me just also talk to you about some of the activities that we are doing at Small. So we're working on these user engagement plans, and it's all about co-design. So we involve them from the very beginning in all the phases of this process, and basically that help us understand what not only to the cities but also to the operators, which direction should they go, and how should we approach a shared mobility service that is accessible but also is functional, also for both for the users and also attractive for the operators, and that also meets the social goals of the cities. And this is so basically that was the key question of the discussion and our last insight paper, our last roundtable, how we actually set in motion a comprehensive shared mobility solution that's accessible and successful in all these ways. And perhaps it's a bit funny, but the answer was perhaps there is not. There's no solution that meets everyone's desires, right, or needs. But I do know that one need that we need to fulfill is the users, at least. So we have to think of a business model. For instance, we talk about loan rentals schemes, because we know that even though we might try different adaptive vehicles or solutions, but at the end, even though also that we focus on specific target groups, we strive because also for the exercise of the project, we just humanly what we can do, but we would even strive for including more people into the projects and to the focus of the project. And that would require thinking of even beyond this type of pilots that we have now. Could be loan rentals, could be. So yeah, this is the whole key question to answer for us. I see here. So here is our project coordinator, Essen, as well, joining us today. I know she has she could have some good takes on it. Sami, also part of the project. Carlota, also we this is the question that drive us, I think. So yeah.
Yeah, I think something that we learned is that in the end, no matter, especially now, no matter whether you're working for a public authority or if you're shared mobility operators, I think everyone wants to go in the same direction. But it is about what is realistic and what is possible now and what is possible tomorrow. And I think something we had learned was that it's important to be profitable on the core business, to be able to do more and more different types of services that would be accessible to more people. I think this makes a good transition with the question that was asked by our dear colleague Encosto in the chats, which was saying some cities have legislation-free zones. So, for example, marine establishment in Amsterdam. Is this concept already included in the scopes of your project to integrate new shared mobility solutions in cities through frameworks? I think this touches upon a bit the flexibility for trial and error and innovation within shared mobility frameworks, right? We often have maybe 1 or 2 years framework, and then we move to another framework, and maybe that's the moment where we can introduce new innovation. But how do you work, maybe going back to Bram, with this freedom to innovate, right, in the policy framework, whether it's a new vehicle, a new solution, a new business model? Is this a topic that you're talking about within your projects in terms of this flexibility of testing new things between the public authorities and the operators?
Yes, well, I think we are mixing a lot of things here. I think, of course, it's key that innovation can take place. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, it feels a bit far. We can hear you, but
Okay,
not as good as
sorry.
before. Now it's good. Yeah.
Okay, great. Sorry. So I said I think we are mixing a couple of things here. Of course, it's absolute key that innovation is possible in cities because I mean we are still, especially for micromobility, in a phase where so many things are developing. So it would be not a good idea to say this is how we're gonna do it for the next 10 years. So innovation is key. I'm not sure. I'm not a legal guy, first of all, so I don't know a lot about
I think we've lost you, Bram, now. I think I'm wondering if your microphone has switched to another microphone. Maybe it might be, but I'm not sure.
no. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it sort of comes and goes.
Strange. Wait, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
In-
Switch to another mic now.
Yeah.
Okay. Where was I? So I don't know a lot about the legislation-free zones. Maybe it's a good solution, but I would rather say like make sure that your framework, or is it even if it's local, national, European, regional, whatever, has it's not too strict on things and allows innovation and different business models, etc. So that's, for example, if you talk about definitions, it's important that the definitions are not too strict and they allow innovation. I don't know if a legislation-free zone is the best solutions. Maybe for some specific things, yes, but I mean, yeah, shared mobility, ideally, of course, it operates in the whole city, and it's a bit hard to make the whole city a legislation-free zone. So I'm not sure if that's the best option for everything to get innovation, but maybe for some very specific things then it might be possible. For example, if I think maybe on inclusion or getting some specific things in a certain area, it might be interesting to have a legislation-free zone, but that's probably hard to expand to the whole city. So that these are my thoughts about it.
So it is also about, I think it was interesting what you said about not being too strict, right? It's not, if you're not too strict, then you allow room for innovation. And I see Maria as well nodding, so maybe you want to comment on it. Is that what you're doing as well on your
There's
side?
always a window for innovative ideas. There is always a window. The legislation free zones, I don't know if they exist, but the sure thing is that there is no legislation describing such, innovative ideas, innovative activities. So yes, there is an opening there. For us, it is better not to have a free zone, but to have a very, very well described legislation about such, activities. But even in Greek law, that is a very strict law in general, you can always find a room for innovative ideas. It depends on how you present them and the climax that you want to to establish them.
Interesting. Thank you, Maria. We have another question, very interesting question, I think, from Pietro Peran. I think that will maybe go back to Bram for now on how do you monitor compliance and make sure everyone is evaluating following the same KPIs. I think once you've put the rules in place and you have multiple operators, of course, you need to have make sure that everyone is evaluated the same way. So how is it in your case? How do you do that?
Well, we ourselves, we never do that, luckily, because I think it's a big challenge. I fully agree. You can say in your legislation, like these are the requirements, but to monitor it, it's hard. To give an example, for example, some Belgian cities have the rule that you need at least 4 unique users per shared car. we are still in, especially for car sharing, are still in the phase in Belgium where we work with Excels. But of course, I mean, an operator can put information in the Excel. I mean, it's a declaration on honor. But I mean, you don't know exactly if it's correct. I think there are, with automatic data sharing and the MDS standards, etc., it might improve things a bit to be able to monitor and evaluate on a better level. But still, then you're depending on the data you get real time as a city, and still this data can be can be manipulated. There has been some examples in Germany on some some concerns about the quality of the data. So I think it's very hard to measure. What we what we did for the car sharing label in Flanders, it's to you have this or the declaration on honor combined with the fact that it's possible to do on site checks of the data. But still, I think it's hard.
So it is the operators who are sort of monitoring themselves, right, and sort of sharing this data.
Yeah, I mean, you're always depending in a way on data from the operators, unless you go to a system that you operate completely yourself as a city. Then it's quite clear that you're the data aggregator and you also review the data. But yeah, I mean that doesn't happen that often. So in general, you're quite depending on operators, and again, there it's very important to have a constructive collaboration to get the good data in and also have confidence that the data is correct.
Interesting. Maybe this makes me think a bit about what the conversation we had now on innovation and KPIs. I think, Daniel, I don't know if you remember, but we talked as well about a lot of municipalities trying to have tricycles, for example, as part of their fleets of vehicles, but you could see that there were almost no KPIs or no expectations, right? I think on the one hand, this leads to trying new vehicles, but on the other hand, we've seen examples where those tricycles were not used at all, and then so there was no sort of incentives for the operators to build projects around the tricycles and make them used by the users. So I think it's always what we were mentioning before, the carrot and stick. Maybe going back to Danielle then on the topic of inclusivity, you found very little evidence of policies looking at inclusivity. Maybe how do you explain that, and where we are in the sector in shared mobility?
I think this the small policy database exercise. So we did find regulation on general on accessibility on transportation in general, accessibility and inclusivity, but those were more like encompassing type of regulations, meaning they would address transport accessibility with regards to infrastructure, so curb design and maybe some type of vehicles and vehicle design, thinking of big means of transportation, not on new mobility services, let alone share mobility. But that is something that we find that on specifically share mobility is very little, and we understand, because also when you think of the different solutions out there for inclusive share mobility, well, there's not so many things. So of course the regulation still needs to catch up on that. That's where we keep searching, but those are general let's say conclusion so far in this exercise. And I like to call it exercise and it's still ongoing, because I know it's not gonna end now. I mean, it's gonna continue, because our idea also for the project is, I mean, and we often discuss it internally, is to kickstart the discussion, right, on a topic that might not seem relevant from a business perspective or an operator perspective, but that is relevant from a societal goals point of view, so from the city, from the user itself. So I think it's gonna catch up, and we are gonna probably find more in the future when we discuss about regulations and shared mobility as such, like SMAPE is promoting and so on. We will need to have this politically high in the agenda, like and include this in all the conditions and all the standards that we want to set. We have to include this part, like make it integral part of the discussion. So SMALL is there trying to push for that. I think in the last roundtable we hosted to discuss how we set an inclusive shared mobility pilot thing. So we had very important operators Europe-wise that run a lot of vehicles, and they are present in many countries. And they were their policy representatives were there, and I think they got the message back. So yeah, this is how I see it, or how we see it.
Yeah, interesting. I think the fact that there are not so many solutions or good cases in Europe now make it that policies should be more allowing for innovation and pushing for innovation together with the operators, because there's not so much to regulate yet. Correct. Then maybe on this final point of the inclusivity, Maria and Brahma, I would be curious to hear from your side. I mean, obviously, we often talked about this mobility for all, and we try to have as many people as possible that could be users of shared mobility services. I think it's also mentioned in all of you that you're trying to convince the end users to use those services. How do you look at this question of inclusivity? So who do we serve through those services? How do we target as many people as possible within our services? Maybe if I can start with Maria and then finishing with Bam.
We haven't thought about inclusivity. But yes, we are starting something that will be addressed to younger people, younger adults, or small families that do not have any, problems, disabilities, or movement problems. But probably, if the legislation catches us, we will have to integrate something like, a vehicle for movement disabilities. But for now, we have no discussion, no ideas about that.
Thank you very much for the honest answer, and it's
I'm
great
sorry,
to hear
but
it. It is very great to hear it, because it is. I think it is also where a lot of authorities are, right? When you think about your first framework or first scheme,
and
I think you already.
Actually, these small islands are not very user friendly
Already.
So we have not thought about it, but I'm already noting, keeping some notes, and probably we can include something now that we're at the beginning.
Very interesting point. No, I think it is also what we've seen in the sector, right? I mean, usually when all those new innovations come in, you always have the early adopters, and then you start to think about more people. And I think now we are a bit at this phase within the sector. And finishing with Bram then on this question, how is it within your projects? How do you tackle this question of the end users and the inclusivity?
Well, first of all, for Autodata.net, inclusivity it's a very important goal. It's a transversal objective within our organization, so we always try to focus on that within our projects. How we do that is, for example, working together with some cities, like in Ghent now, where we have weekly, I don't know the English word, but loquette, where you can go and there's someone available to ask questions to. So it lowers the threshold for people to ask for information. It's in a non-digital way also. So we try to do things there. On the other hand, of course, it's, well, not every shared mobility mode, but most of them are still in the early adopter phase. So we cannot forget that we also have to reach out to many. There's still a lot of low-hanging fruit, let's say it like that. So it's finding a good balance between make it that it's available for as many target groups as possible, but at the other hand also keep focusing on the low-hanging fruit. with communication sections, etc. Maybe I think also there, if we talk about car sharing, because making shared mobility more inclusive, I mean, shared mobility, it's a lot. It's bikes, scooters, cars, etc. So I think, from my experience with cars, we cannot forget that these are 25,000, 30,000, maybe more euros expensive things. So I understand also why some operators are a bit reluctant to really focus or like open it up for everyone, because yeah, it's a risk. It's more expensive than an e-scooter. And also I think on the policy level, there are some things that are still can be improved. Like, for example, I think the economical risk for people, for example, with reduced budget, or the lower budget or lower income. I think, yeah, the social welfare can play a big role in there as well, and financing some initial costs to become member of car sharing, like some membership fees, etc. All these things. But we see there in reality that there is not always a lot of willingness for municipalities or cities to do that. Some of them, yes, they do, but not all of them. And I think this is of course very important to collaborate also there with operators to find solutions to make the threshold for people as low as possible, especially for those who have a lower income, for example.
Thank you. It is interesting on your last examples, because I think we do that a lot with public transports, but the fact that there's still reluctancy on the car sharing is interesting, because I see that as sort of the same.
For example, I mean, if you damage the vehicle, there's always X amount of euros you have to pay yourself, depending on which operator, 400, 500, 600, 700 euros. And then the question is, yeah, okay, who's gonna pay for that? Is it the municipality? And they say, yeah, no, but we're not gonna say, like, we are not responsible for a person who is driving the car. Yeah, but this person maybe cannot pay this, and then it has to be paid by the operator. So you're sort of in a circle. And I think there are solutions, but it's just a matter of collaborating with each other and finding a solution.
Yeah, no, I really like what you said as well at the beginning. It's about also finding a balance between getting more people to the services, but also continue to tap into the low-hanging fruits, because there's still a lot of early adopters that we're not reaching. We have 3-4 final minutes before we finish this call. So I'll ask our 3 speakers maybe to wrap up, and if there would be any final tip or recommendations you would like to give to policymakers, things that you've learned personally, for example, in your journey in the last months or years, what would that be? I think there are a lot of people who are drafting policies or preparing their upcoming tenders for shared mobility. What is one final tip that you would like to give everyone? Let's start with Maria, then maybe Daniel, and finish with Bram.
Our focus is to have a call for proposals regarding the microhubs till the end of the project, that is in 2026. And we hope to have answers in our questions till the end of the 2025 year, so as to be able to have a complete framework for this call of proposals. The legislation in Greece is a very big problem. We don't have anything about that. We have a very big issue on insurance, that is from private companies, and how much does the private insurance covers damages, and what happens when you lose the vehicle in the sea, for example, for us. We have many questions, but I have many notes from this meeting, and I have many questions to go and make to others.
Then maybe we can come back at the end of the SMAPE project and organize another webinar and hear from your experience on those questions. And in the meantime, thank you, Maria.
That was a very, very nice opportunity. And we hope to have more such webinars for us to learn from you.
That's great to hear. Daniel, any final tips, maybe for people like Maria as well, who are in their process of tracking their shared mobility frameworks and call for projects. What did you learn in SMALL that you could share? One
Yes.
thing you have to choose.
Maybe just a recommendation now. I mean, not from what we have learned, is just to bridge. Let's take the opportunity to bridge the gap at the very beginning. I mean, there's no need to wait until you have already the mainstream vision of shared mobility, but let's just, as a technocrat or a researcher, I think we're mostly technocrats as out of cities and researchers. Maybe talk to the politicians and engage from the very beginning with the target groups and mix them. Normal, I think it's honest discussion between everyone without making distinctions, treating everyone the same as they should, and bridge the gap and come up with a solution right away, and let's not wait until we have a.
Thank you, Daniel. So honest discussions, that's what I remember. And Bram, on your side, what would be the final tip for any policymakers at the moment?
I have two. First is I think if we talk about frameworks, try to look at it with an open view and explore other ways on regulating shared mobility rather than the classic concessions, licenses, etc. And the second one is, I think, participating don't stay on your island, and participating in talks like this and European projects really helps with getting some new insights. And in that way, I really like this SMAPE project, because I think that's one of the first shared mobility projects focusing on the whole of Europe. And it's really nice to see that there's a lot of transfer of knowledge between all the partners, and you see things are moving all over Europe. So my second tip is to do that more.
Perfect, Bram. Thank you very much. You're making it easy for me to wrap up this webinar, because I think indeed over the last years there's been just so many experiments and knowledge that we created around those, whether it's in Belgium, in the Netherlands, in France, and so on. And I think now is really the time where we're trying to structure all of that and put definition terms and so on. And I think you do it very well within the SMAPE project. And I think this webinar at least gave a good glimpse of it. So thank you very much. We are on time, I think. I'm looking at Alonso and Jorge. I hope we did a good job for this webinar. Thank you very much again for attending. Thank you to the speakers, and hopefully see you soon in either a European project, another webinar, or an event across Europe. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sabi.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, everyone.
everyone.